joined. Very happy to see your face if you'd like to put your camera on, but understandable if you don't want to. If you can keep your, that's lovely, Deborah. If you can keep your microphones on mute, just for background noise, unfortunately, you'll get to hear the ice cream van take off again. There's a chat function, so if you want to pose your questions there, we've got some gaps in this presentation and discussion for Laura's going to assist me by reading out the questions, and I'll do my best to answer. I am flying solo today. Yesterday, Jack Hanson was my wingman talking heritage, so I'll do my best to answer all your questions here and now, but also because we've got a written record of them, we can provide a fuller response to you, and we're compiling a list of FAQs which we'll put on the website as well. So just urge you to, well, you've probably seen it anyway, but go to jewelleryquarter.net/neighbourhood-plan, neighbourhood-plan, and Laura will pop that link on the chat now. If you want access to the documents, there's the neighbourhood plan, which is quite a big weighty document because it's got lots of context and planning language in it. There's a plain English version, which is my favourite and much more succinct and easy to understand. And then there's an accompanying design in the Jewellery Quarter, which is about the design of buildings, which if you're planning minded and architecture minded, that will float your boat. In terms of the running order, I'll do a short introduction to neighbourhood planning now, and then there'll be a space for questions about the Jewellery Quarter neighbourhood plan and what it can do. Then I'll talk through about what the neighbourhood plan does for the jewellery industry and other creative businesses, and an opportunity to deal with some questions there. And then I'll wrap it up with the next steps of the neighbourhood plan and any final questions, and I'll get us finished by 2 o'clock. So really just setting the context in terms of who is doing the neighbourhood plan. It was initiated by the Jewellery Quarter Development Trust, but very much it's that was the kind of light in the blue touch paper, and thereafter it was a group of volunteers. This whole neighbourhood plan is voluntary. It's led by the community, written by the community, and very much done in our spare time. There's probably, I would say, about 40 people over the years have come together to create the neighbourhood plan, and none of us are, professional planners doing it as a paid exercise. We do have some planners voluntarily doing it, people who live in the quarter, and lots of input from all sorts of businesses, residents that have made up this planning panel. It's not yet finished. It needs your input. This Regulation 14 consultation is a very catchily titled stage that the neighbourhood planning the government came up with. But this is the draft consultation. So it needs your input. It needs your review. It needs your comments, and it needs your support as well. So what I will do now, just bear with me. Flying solo means I have to multitask, and as a man, I'm not very good at that. Please move us on to the next slide. So, for those of you that are, well, maybe less familiar with the area and the neighbourhood plan area, the area that we're talking about is inside this red line, and this is the formal designation document. So at this end, which is the southeast end, we've got Great Charles Street, Queensway, and then in the northwest end, we've got the Ring Road, the Middleway. Big Tesco's here, and then the Hockley flyover is here. Now, what you'll see is that we've gone beyond the traditional border of the Jewellery Quarter, and that's so that we pick up these industrial buildings here, because it's very much making a cohesive whole. We've got a residential area here, which is very domestic in scale, and it moves to industrial, and that's very much the nature of the Jewellery Quarter. Then we brush up against the Gun Quarter, and then come back to Snow Hill. So that's the area that we're talking about. The neighbourhood plan area itself was redesignated on the 22nd of October last year. However, it's been 7 years in the pipeline, with the first couple of years really gathering evidence as to what the Jewellery Quarter, what the issues facing the Jewellery Quarter are, and what the neighbourhood plan can do about it. So why does it take this long? Well, a neighbourhood plan has to be evidence-based. So there's lots of aspirational stuff in there. We want to do this, but you have to justify it. So a good couple of years was spent doing that. And I guess just as a final point there, it's important to note that it's both larger than the conservation area and the bid area. So it does affect some businesses, premises, land that sit outside both of those areas. But why do it? And really, it was the people who volunteered to undertake a neighbourhood plan. Our community-based people. I apologise, I didn't introduce myself. So you know my name, Matthew Bott. I co-chair the neighbourhood plan, and in my day job is I work as head of design management for a large construction company. But my role in this, I'm also a director of the Jewellery Quarter Development Trust, and I became a director through my involvement in the neighbourhood plan. I was one of the many volunteers that got our heads together and said, we've got to do something to help the future of the Jewellery Quarter, and we recognised that neighbourhood planning was one of the tools to do that. Really what was driving us was a feeling that the current planning system was a bit old. It had done its job to a degree in terms of staving off overdevelopment of the Jewellery Quarter in the early 2000s, but it was implemented in a very much reactive way. And now it was a need to look to the future and become more proactive about looking at what the Jewellery Quarter needs rather than what it doesn't need. What does the Jewellery Quarter need? How are we going to go about tackling dereliction? How are we going to make the planning system work to keep the vitality of the area and help it grow and evolve as the 21st century throws opportunities and challenges to the Jewellery Quarter businesses and residents? And really, with the move to city living, how can we satisfactorily incorporate businesses and residents alongside one another and really keep the area's USP? And so the neighbourhood plan, the Jewellery Quarter neighbourhood plan, was born out of this, and very much a tool to do that. One of many tools, though, because one thing that is important to remember through all of this is it's planning related. So there's only certain things that it can do, and there are certain things that it can't do. And one of the things that it must do is, under neighbourhood planning rules, is be pro-development. So it's not about NIMBYism. It's about saying, yes, we want development. We want the right type of development that helps the area. So the vision for the neighbourhood plan is, and I've highlighted, I don't need to read it out, but the bits that I've highlighted on the screen are most relevant to the jewellery and creative industries. That's really about a community of businesses, a successful community of businesses, and jewellery and design and making of any type at the heart of it. Creative approach to conservation, so not just preserving things in aspect, but really looking at what are we trying to conserve, and it's not just our old buildings, it's the industry that gives the area its soul, and really stimulating the vitality for future generations, and providing that sense of place that will help the industry grow. So we've got 4 goals there that are overarching goals. The plan isn't broken down into goal 1 and here's what we're going to do about it. These are the general goals of, if we have a successful plan, we will have achieved these goals. And at the bottom of it, really just underlining the whole thing, is that this isn't something drafted by the city council or anyone else. It's the jewellery quarter that's come forward to write this, and it's written to with our area in mind. You wouldn't be able to take this neighbourhood plan and impose it on another part of Birmingham, because it's just not. It's tailored to our specific needs. Any questions on neighbourhood plans before I go on? I think one thing to for those that are familiar with planning documents in the Jewellery Quarter is that there's a conservation area management plan. That is being reviewed by Birmingham City Council. They have to produce that document, and that is shortly coming out for consultation, and really works with the neighbourhood plan. And then it sits as part of the planning documentation that architects and developers have to consider, and then planning officers make their decisions based on the Jewellery Quarter neighbourhood plan, the Birmingham plan, as well as other documents. If there's no questions, or you know, I'll move on to the next bit. Feel free to just pop them in the chat, and we'll come back to them at suitable pauses.
There's no questions at the minute, Matt.
Okay, marvellous. So the bit that you're all here for really is this, and it's jewellery and creative industries. And as part of that extensive evidence gathering that we've done over a number of years, we did a lot of engagement with the jewellery industry, a lot of engagement with other creative businesses, and the definition of that I'll come on to shortly. But really, we got some strong messages out here, and there's about 10 items that came up as common themes. Some of them you'll see in grey aren't really planning issues. So the neighbourhood plan might be able to help things along a little bit, but it's very much an indirect way that the neighbourhood plan can help. However, the ones in green are things that the planning system can help with, and that's why I've highlighted them, and we'll explore them a bit further. Some of these you'll hopefully recognise, and not necessarily in a good way, but recognise as issues, and are perhaps even identify with some of them. Bear with me a second. This slide, however, shows us from other surveys, not just carried out by us, some of the issues that have been facing the Jewellery Quarter. So in the top left is the draft conservation area management plan, which is due to come out this year, as I mentioned, and that clearly says that the land pressure for residential development is a threat to the industry because of higher capital values. Simple as that. Let's go back a few years with the Jewellery Quarter Industry Cluster Survey, and they clearly state there 85% felt that high rents and rates were a threat, and more than 2/3 seeing residential development as being a particular concern. We then go back a little bit further, and again it's residential development that is effectively out-competing other uses. Yeah, ironically, when the Jewellery Quarter Townscape Heritage work, which is underway at the moment, when a survey was done in advance of that, one of the things that jumps out is that when people come to the Jewellery Quarter, most people are most impressed with the rich industrial history, but it's not just, oh, well, this is what happened in the past. It's the fact that it's still there. And so that's our USP. We've all seen plenty of places around the country and around the world where you've got a sign saying, oh, 100 years ago, these things were made here. And that's all very nice, but we've got a living, breathing industry which has an opportunity to grow and evolve. So how does the neighbourhood plan work, and how does the neighbourhood plan help address this? Well, the neighbourhood plan itself, the documents that I mentioned on the website, is split into 4 sections. Whether you pick up the full director's cut, if you like, or whether you take the plain English one. And those 4 sections are about, first and foremost, putting the jewellery and creative industries up front, supporting and protecting, because it's all about providing space for those industries to grow and evolve. It's not about preserving them in aspect. The second one is then broadly talking about the jewellery quarter as a mixed-use quarter, really bringing in and saying that we've got to acknowledge that residential is here and residential is an asset to the jewellery quarter, but it can't be a case of a zero-sum game where the advantage of one is the disadvantage of another. And then section 3 is really about getting around the quarter and improving the quarter for people who are here and people who are coming here. And then section 4 is about how the jewellery quarter looks and feels. So that's just to give you an overview of the neighbourhood plan itself. And then a deeper dive into it is that all 4 sections have aspects which address the needs of the jewellery and creative industries. So if you look at it from a heritage point of view or a building design point of view, it's quite clear that there's sections that are relevant to those subjects. But because jewellery and creative industries are so important to the jewellery quarter, it touches all 4 sections of the neighbourhood plan. So I mentioned a little earlier about the definition of creative industries. Well, the government, I think it was the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, defines creative industries as those which have their origin in individual creativity, skill and talent. And then it talks about the potential for wealth and job creation and intellectual property. And what's interesting, the table on the right is the catchy standard industrial classification for the creative industry, and you can see the highlighted sections. What's most interesting and really good news for us as a jewellery quarter, because of the doors that it opens, is that under section 3, crafts, the manufacture of jewellery and related articles is defined as a creative industry, and that, in terms of bidding for future grants and government initiatives, is really good news. And the other things in those green highlighted areas, if you have a look at the list, you'll hopefully recognise that a lot of these things happen in the jewellery quarter as well. So that's why we talk about the jewellery and creative industries, because it's not about pigeonholing a particular business and saying, well, you're a jewellery business, when actually they may branch out into other aspects of creative industries, or rely on other creative businesses that aren't specifically classified as jewellery. So we've got to speak in a more global term, because the ecosystem of the jewellery quarter is not just people who cast gold or cut diamonds or set stones, and hence the bit more global talk. Excuse me, let me just have a sip of water. And apologies for being in a bit of a broadcast mode, but because I'm a flying solo, it's not like I can have a break and then let someone else take over. The evening session, we will do that, and we can do a bit of a deeper dive into some of these issues as well. So if there's anything that you would like us to explore more in the evening session, drop it in the group chat and say, we really need to major on this, and maybe have a bit more of a discussion, two-way discussion. Then we can tailor the agenda for the evening session a bit more. So going back to that section 1 of the neighbourhood plan, really I think probably the prize policy in there is the creation of a creative district. It's called the economic character zone because that's a bit kind of planning-y speak, and really it's an area that's defined by the economic character or the industrial or business uses taking place inside it. So as we undertook a major survey of identifying all, if not as many as possible, jewellery businesses in the quarter and just outside the quarter. Out of those, I think we had an 86% engagement rate face-to-face questionnaire with those businesses, and over 250 were surveyed, and we've mapped this creative district. So if you look at the map on the left, I'll just get my mouse. You'll see that we've plotted in purple all of the jewellery and jewellery-related businesses in the quarter. Then we've tried to link, well, we've linked them up using this hatched area, which goes in and out a bit, but this hatched area to link them all up and designate a creative district. And for those that are familiar with some of the planning terminology for the jewellery quarter, there's the industrial middle, as it's known, is here, but the jewellery industry doesn't occupy all of the industrial middle. And then we've got the golden triangle, which sits, the big peg sits here, and so it's sort of the area to the north of the big peg going past the station. Now, the big difference here is that the current planning regime talks about the industrial middle and the golden triangle. Well, that is where the jewellery industry was based 100 years ago. The jewellery industry isn't based there anymore. It's moved, and as businesses want to move, they might want more modern premises, they might downsize, they might grow, but they've moved, and this is really a recognition that they've moved. And what's important, it's important that we preserve the old buildings of heritage quality, but it's also important that we preserve the economic and industrial character of the area and support jewellery and creative businesses as much as possible. So we've designated this area, and there's a series of policies which really exist to say development in this area should benefit the creative district. So if you want to build an extension, if you are a jewellery business and you want to build an extension, great, because that's a benefit to the area. If you have a bit of land and you maybe want to put some residential in there, there's limits. There's a maximum 50% limit, but you can only do that residential if you are doing something to benefit the area. So if you are putting affordable workspace that's suitable for jewellery or creative industries, then it could be considered. If you are taking an ugly building, a bit of 1970s unglamorous, and making it more appropriate to the area, then you can get permission. So underlining it is any development in this creative district must benefit the creative district, and it really it sets out some criteria as to what those benefits might be. So in order to keep jewellery at the heart of the jewellery quarter, we've got this creative area and a rationale that development should benefit the creative district. What it also does is increases the supply of suitable space for jewellery and creative businesses. So and I'll come on to the benefits as the screen ban again. You can hear that, Deborah. So I know you can probably hear that from where you are as well. One of the things that it does is just one of the challenges that rents face, and this is not just the jewellery quarter, this is everywhere, is unless you increase the supply, the only way of controlling rents is to put rent controls in. But the best way of getting affordable rents is to make sure there's a plentiful supply of space. However, it's not just about increasing the supply of suitable space. There are mechanisms in there to encourage people to provide affordable workspace. And then rounding this section off, there's establishing the principle of a jewellery quarter creative incubator. So this is not something that planning can just click its fingers and make happen. But what we're doing with the neighbourhood plan is paving the way for this to happen. So if an organisation were to come forward, or a group of organisations got together and said, we want to create this catapult or catalyst or whatever you want to call it, the planning system has already said you will get permission to do that. And that's the important bit that the neighbourhood plan brings in. And it will help stimulate it. It's set down there, so it gives something for people to coalesce around. So what does it do, these group of policies? Well, going back to that list of what the challenges are for the jewellery industry, it helps with the skills and the ageing workforce, which were indirect ones, but the creative incubator helps deal with that. It helps tackle the issue of the rent being too high or land values being too much. It provides suitable space for the industry and allows businesses to grow and change. The sale of some of the Birmingham Property Services, the Birmingham City Council owned property company, it makes that less of an issue because there's a good supply of new space or repurposed space coming online. And it really reinforces the ecosystem of the jewellery industry by not hemming everyone in. It allows using plenty of space means that people can move around, establish new businesses, grow or change if they need to. It also, having a creative district, really sets out that, here is a destination that businesses can move to and visitors can come to and spend their money. And it also helps deal with this culture clash or the potential risk of having residents and industry nearby by saying this is an industry first area. Are there any questions on this bit?
Yeah, Matt, Michelle's just said, not long ago, the council was selling off buildings where lots of workshops were situated. What stage is that at? It seems to me that it does not fit with your aims.
The honest answer is I don't know what so I know that they went on the market. They didn't sell all of their portfolio, but they put certain buildings up for sale. I know one or two of them fell through. But I guess ultimately, this doesn't stop people buying or selling buildings. But whoever buys those buildings, as and when the neighbourhood plan is in place, they know what they can and can't do. So I guess what it will help to do is stop people speculating. So I dare say some of those people interested in buying some of those buildings will go, great, well, we can hoof all the businesses out, get residents in, and get a load more money for it. Well, by having the neighbourhood plan in place with some of these modifications to what are existing planning rules, it spells out what you can't do, and it will help stop that speculation. At the same time, people who are interested in running, owning buildings and running them as business premises, either for themselves or for letting them out, it also tells them where they can invest and what kind of space that they should be providing, what the area needs. So in a roundabout way, if things have fallen through, then that's good news for the neighbourhood plan, because then all being well, the neighbourhood plan will be in place when the next buyer comes along, and the next buyer will go pick this up and go, right, I understand where I am, what I've got to do, and these are my proposals. Does that kind of answer your question?
There's no other questions at the minute.
Okay.
Matt, it's Kate.
Hello.
Did we have any thoughts on what affordable meant in terms of affordable workspace? Because I know that was something that was being discussed.
So there's been we've pegged it to the affordable housing policy that the council have already, that for all of Birmingham. And I should know this off the tip of my tongue, but I think it's this is for major development. It's 35%. The starting point is 35% of the overall space should be available at 80% of the market rate. And the principle of affordable workspace is now set with the planning decision for the A. Harris scheme, which covers this area, which is part of the consent. So it's not only just a policy, it's now being translated from housing into workspace. However, I think it's that will be affordable is kind of targeted at high-end large developments, whereas if you are taking an old building and doing a light refurbishment to it, by its very nature it's going to be affordable anyway, so it helps deal with the kind of the high value schemes whilst not penalising the ones that would provide affordable space anyway. Thank you, Kate, good to see you. Right, let me just time check. 25 minutes. So that's the kind of the showcase policy around keeping the jewellery at the heart of the jewellery quarter. Then outside, well, more broadly across the jewellery quarter, not just focusing on the creative district, there's a whole host of policies which affect the whole jewellery quarter. And there's a few simple ones here. Of all major development, which is over 1,000 square metres, must provide space suitable for creative jewellery and creative businesses. There must be no loss of commercial space. So if someone, for example, is buying a building or a piece of land with a building on it that has some commercial space in it, then if they're proposing to knock it down, they must provide that commercial space, same amount as a minimum or more. They must also provide affordable workspace again. So this is talking about affordable workspace outside of the creative district. And then it's also given the flexibility for buildings, older buildings in particular, that are empty, to have meanwhile or temporary uses in them. Because the worst enemy of an old building is for it to be left empty. So if you can get a meanwhile use in there, which is maybe a pop-up bar, it might be a pop-up shop, it might be markets at the weekend, whatever it is, they're generating a bit of income which pays for the roof to be mended or whatever. I guess most fundamentally, it starts to articulate what kind of space is needed. So it puts an obligation on developers and encourages them to provide a range of sizes and types of space, but then it starts to point them in the direction of what kind of space might be needed. It's not prescriptive, because in 3 years' time that might be changed completely. There might be a revolution in let's say the jewelry industry, and they want high-tech space and not space where you've got noisy equipment or whatever. So it's not prescriptive about that, but it just starts to explore these are the kinds of spaces that you can see there, which have come from the jewelry and other designer makers, of what kind of spaces that they need, and then it's down to the developer to propose what they're coming up with and justify it. These are fairly kind of high level obligations, but they really start to deliver on a wider jewellery quarter as a creative quarter within this creative district at its heart. And these go to address a few more of these. So going back to that list of challenges or issues, it helps to tackle high rent and values, both through the supply of space and provision of affordable workspace. It tackles dereliction and neglect. There's also particularly for old heritage buildings out across the quarter, it gives more flexibility into the uses of those. So if it's been sitting empty and they can't get a particular business type in there, then it gives them the flexibility to go to other types of uses. It brings online more new space or refurbished space to allow businesses to grow and change. And again, it starts to mitigate the effects of Birmingham Property Services putting their portfolio up on the market. And then again, helps the ecosystem and really reinforces this destination of the jewellery quarter as a creative area. And also, going back to that culture clash, it helps tackle that. Any questions before I move on to the next slide?
Yeah, Matt, Philip said, what reaction are you receiving from the leading manufacturers in the jewellery quarter to your proposed plan?
Good question. It's It's been a fairly muted reaction, and I guess it's not insofar as there's not been a big engagement of wanting to attend these sessions. There have been some conversations, and I've over the course of the past few years of the plan, for example, been in touch with the jewellery quarter industry cluster, briefing them, and really it was the JQIC, which is a bunch of predominantly manufacturing-led businesses that really saw benefit in this creative district and the level of protection that it affords. They were very supportive of that. I've also been to see Marie Haddleton of the Hockley Flyer and of Jewellery Quarter legend herself, and she taken through the neighbourhood plan, both in a much earlier stage, and got her comments back and addressed them, and recently with this draft as well. So I'm taking it a bit that silence is endorsement, because people usually do shout up if there's something fundamentally wrong. But we are making efforts to engage directly and elicit some views, because it's important that we get their support. You know, if this is seen as helping their cause, then we want them to say so. Just conscious of time, we've got 17 or 18 minutes. So the next bit really is talking about the Jewellery Quarter as a destination, and I'm using this as a bit of a sweep up for other areas that provide significant benefit to the jewellery industry and other creative businesses. But some of these are a little bit more abstract and indirect. So there's a whole piece on design in the Jewellery Quarter, design of buildings, and the neighbourhood plan gives greater weight for design. So, you know, this is a more global issue. It affects the city as well. But when you've got 244 listed buildings, a large conservation area, and people who come to the Jewellery Quarter either to visit, but to set up businesses and to live here. One of the main reasons they do is because of the inherent industrial character and beauty of many of the buildings. But that beauty is diminished by poor quality development or unsympathetic development, or poor workmanship. So we're giving greater weight to design and really laying the gauntlet down and saying that, you know, we've got future heritage, or we need to have future heritage, and that the new buildings in the quarter have got to be as good as the old ones, if not better. They've got to be able to sit alongside and hold their own, and really be built to last, and high quality. Also in the design stage is our opportunity to deal with that culture clash that we mentioned. So there's something called the agent of change principle, which sits in national planning policy. But we've kind of highlighted that and said, these are some of the specific issues that face the Jewellery Quarter, and really underlined it to say that the onus is on the developer, or the applicant, to identify and deal with any potential nuisance at the design stage. So if someone wants to build some flats next to a bar or a factory, they've got to do the legwork, find out what the issues are and deal with them. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have to deal with them by, you know, great double glazing or whatever. It could be that they pop next door and say, you've got a noisy bit of plant, can I buy you a new piece, which is quieter, more efficient, deals with the issue. So it encourages people to be a bit more creative in their thinking. But this policy is specifically addressing those concerns that happen when offices move next to factories, bars open next to flats open next to bars, which I think we've all read about in the press. These all kind of these are all about making the Jewellery Quarter a better place, hence the destination, and making it a better place to invest, to visit, to come and spend the money and support the businesses. And with that in mind, it's also directing, a bit like the bit that I mentioned before, the kind of space that is suitable for creative independent businesses. So this is again just beginning to articulate some of the things that the jewelry industry and designer makers and web designers and architects who have all set up home in the Jewellery Quarter, what they're after. It's not prescriptive, it's not the only thing that should be there, and some of them won't be applicable, but it's starting to say, when you're providing space suitable for these businesses, these are the kind of things that you need to think about. So it's not necessarily high spec. Simple, robust is a very important one that's come out, but flexible space, lots of natural light. Some businesses want communal amenities, some want their own front door. A lot of them will want the ability to make noise and have equipment that generates vibration. Lots want 3-phase electricity. Lots want good quality broadband. Where I am at the minute, I live in the quarter, and we have copper wire, and I've had to get a 4G router because our internet is woeful. So we should have super fast broadband across the Jewellery Quarter as standard, and all new developments should be seeking to put it in. Secure premises, particularly, lots of people have told us, particularly designer makers, have said that they work late at night, so they want that behind closed doors, know that they're safe, and security has to be a major consideration. Another part of Destination Jewellery Quarter is some of the more kind of strategic aspects. And you've got two maps here. The one on the left shows new routes, and this was really comes from two different studies. One particularly around this middle section, which is the A. Harris site. The Prince's Foundation, which is Prince Charles's charity for the built environment, came and did a study for us and said one of the biggest barriers to the progress of the Jewellery Quarter as a destination is the fact that people come down New Hall Street from town, and then they see what they think is a dead end, and so they turn back and go back into town. There's also the Queensway, which is another issue, but they were saying you need to get flow through here. Now this is in the consented A. Harris scheme, but just in case it doesn't go ahead, we want to make sure it's in the neighbourhood plan. So that was one big intervention. And then particularly around this western part of the Jewellery Quarter and the northern part, there's lots of dereliction. And one of the reasons for that is that they're quite cut off. So to get to, for example, this road here from the station, if you by car, you have to go out down the main road and then kind of double back on yourself. And then this area here, Camden Terrace, is actually really difficult to get to as a pedestrian. If you're here, you have to walk right around the block. So you're not encouraging footfall. So by unlocking and creating any development in those areas, have to contribute and create these routes, you're starting to unlock those areas, driving up investment, creating space suitable for businesses, but also increasing footfall, which makes it easier and better and more profitable for those businesses to trade. And then the second map on is key routes, which are these routes of high or potentially high footfall, and really saying these are where we should have active frontages, lots of coming and going during the day, cafes, but workplaces, bars, shops, anything that creates that kind of high streety feel, lots of people on the street, lots of safety because there's plenty of eyes and ears on the street, and really draw people through, because people will walk down a busy street but they'll turn back if they feel it's a bit quiet. And so really it's about unlocking those areas and making it making it easier to get around, but also connecting us to the adjacent districts. And you can see that we've made a point of crossing the Queensway here, and that's really setting it down in planning terms that we want to see the Queensway dealt with, perhaps connect the tunnels up, but we want pedestrians to be able to cross safely without going over a bridge or through a tunnel themselves. So that makes the Jewellery Quarter a better destination and gives more footfall. And then the final bit, which is some of the most exciting bits from a more kind of placemaking perspective, are these, excuse me, these string of pearls, or these nodes. Some of these exist. So Daya Square exists as a little square. Obviously, St Paul's Square and Golden Square exists. But there's no reason why we can't have these little pocket parks, or gardens, or squares, or whatever. It doesn't say what they must be, but it identifies them as areas of small focal points where people can go and meet their clients, or sit and have a coffee, or go and eat their lunch if you work here, or just go and hang out and create that real kind of rich experience. They also effectively create stepping stones, and most of them can be seen from one another, so it encourages people to explore. And of course, if they become landmarks, so you can say, as many of us, well, we can't do anymore because the clock's not there, but people say, "Oh, go up to the clock and turn right," and we're just on the right hand side. Well, we're providing more of those landmarks for navigational pointers, and people to really take pride in their area. And so these will have active businesses on them, whether it's a shop or a cafe or whatever, high quality public realm, and things like public art or greenery. So with this string of pearls, there's also policies around public art and encouraging public art, because nothing says that you're a creative area more than seeing lots of public art around. There's a clear demand from businesses and residents that they want more greenery, and I think COVID has thrown that into sharp relief of being able to go for a bit of walk and taking a bit of nature and fresh air, and just have time to get out of the workplace or get out of the house and just let your mind rest a bit. And also dereliction, which we've got a picture of the Bernard Lowe building up there, but in order to reinforce the Jewellery Quarter as a destination, we can't have old heritage buildings falling down. So the neighbourhood plan takes a carrot and stick approach by encouraging and facilitating the restoration of old buildings through flexibility of use, but supporting enforcement against those who are neglecting their buildings. So what do they collectively do, these measures for Destination Jewellery Quarter? Well, it does quite a lot. So the one that's been elusive out of all of those challenges is competition from abroad. Well, abroad might be able to make things at scale cheaper, but if we create a destination, the Jewellery Quarter as a destination, they can't compete with that. So that helps some way to deal with that. It helps with the rent, as I mentioned, with the supply of space. It definitely tackles dereliction and neglect through that carrot and stick approach, and with the extra provision of space and the creation of this destination, it really facilitates the growth of the jewellery and creative businesses, and allows them to evolve, because we can't predict what's going to happen. So to create the space and flexibility for them, for the industries to do what they need to do is the underlying principle. And it also helps us with this culture clash, going back to that onus on the developer to identify and mitigate nuisance. So any questions before I move on to next steps?
No questions at the moment.
Okay, well, get typing if you've got a few, because this is just a single slide. And really the next steps for the neighbourhood plan, this consultation runs till the 25th of September. So we want your feedback, because you know, whilst it's the easy way out is for a little bit of feedback, saying, yeah, we think it's good, thanks very much. But that's not what it's about. That's not why people get out of bed to do this. It's getting really good constructive feedback. Even if you know, supportive of it, just drop a note using the website. Drop a note to say that you support its aims, you support the certain bits of it that you think are really good in particular. Tell us, because that helps us enormously. If there are bits that you think, oh, you're a little bit off the mark here, and here are the reasons why, tell us. Make it really good constructive feedback. So we then take that feedback. There's a neighbourhood planning process that we have to follow. We take that feedback, and we make amendments to the plan. If there's a strong feeling, strong opinion of support for something, we can help reinforce that. If there's good evidence that things need to change slightly, then or wholesale, then we make those amendments. After that, the plan moves from draft into final, and then it goes to Birmingham City Council, and they publish it for the proper planning consultation. Once that has been done and it's found to be sound by an independent examiner, because of COVID, that's the point at which it becomes a document that planning applications are judged against. In time, when we're allowed to congregate again, there will be a referendum which is scheduled to be with the mayoral elections in May next year. That will ratify the plan. But there's got to be two, because we are a business area. 10,000 people work here, 7,000 people live here. So we're one of, I think, less than a dozen neighbourhood plans that have a designated business areas. And so we have a referendum for businesses and a referendum for residents. So it's quite exciting in that respect, because there's over 1,000 neighbourhood plans being made across the country. And most of them are rural and very much residential neighbourhood plans. But we're one of a handful of business ones, which makes what we're trying to tackle really quite interesting. But also having that kind of very urban joined up, having to think about everything holistically, it makes us one of the pioneer areas in that respect. So that's me done. Any further questions?
Matt, it's Kate. I just wanted to thank you for flying solo on that. Well done. And just to pick up on one point that I think is just a really key element of the plan, which is the nuisance provision, because I think we have all seen how kind of progress on the one hand can be kind of quite detrimental. So I think sort of that is a key provision to enable the creative industries to live harmoniously with other businesses and with residents, which is essentially what we're trying to achieve through the plan. Second one, which is kind of goes that destination point, is that idea of the string of pearls to kind of draw people through the jewellery quarter. I personally think that's a really exciting provision of the plan, and hopefully that will come together and kind of make the jewellery quarter, I think, really the destination that it should already be. So yeah, thanks for taking us through those things.
No worries. And yes, I think string of pearls is one of the things that probably excites me the most, because it's something that is very tangible. You'll see something happen. Any further questions? Have I seen one from Philip?
Yes, so Philip's just said, Matt, this has been very good. The big thing for me is the continuing control of the 4-storey height rule for the jewellery quarter. Whilst blunt, this has been very effective, and going forward, we must not give a flickering green light for developers to build higher.
Great. So I'll answer this as the last question and then let everyone go. Yes, I agree. And I think in very economic terms, it applies a pressure to developers and landowners to not expect to get a huge fortune for their land because they can put 10 stories on there. So what the neighbourhood plan does, this is where it works hand in glove with the conservation area. So we're fully expecting the new conservation area management plan to reiterate that 4-storey height, which applies to everything north of the canal. So city centre side, city core side of the canal, it doesn't. But in the conservation area, it's a maximum 4 storeys. That has been exploited. So some developers have gone, oh, well, we're in a 2-storey area, but we're allowed to go up to 4. So what the neighbourhood plan does is bring in a lot more, bring in a lot of focus on context. So you've got to be in context with your surroundings. So if you're in a 2-storey area, then 4-storey is not appropriate. However, if you cast your mind back to the map that shows that the neighbourhood plan area is the other side of Great Hampton Street, some of the buildings around there are 5 stories. So actually 6 or 7 stories might be appropriate because they're well away from the traditional heart of the Jewellery Quarter, the very low-rise area. In short, Philip, the answer is yes, it seeks to maintain the height limit, but actually it seeks to improve it and make it a bit more nuanced. It'd be worth, we've gone out and asked people's opinions on this as to how effective it is. So it might well be that the wording of those policies is strengthened a bit if it's felt that it can be exploited. But I'm 100% with you. I think having that very kind of domestic scale and nature of the Jewellery Quarter is part and parcel of what makes it special. So that just leaves me to thank you all for attending. This has been recorded, so we'll be sharing a recording of it so you can watch back at your leisure and shout at the telly a bit if you realise that you didn't ask a question that you meant. But taking the feedback on board, we'll arrange another one for an evening session focused on the jewellery and creative industries again, probably pictured at about 7:30. So just leaves me to wish you all a very good afternoon and thank you for tuning in.